Hi, I'm Kelly Monaco. I'm currently unemployed, so I created this channel to earn some extra income. I'll be updating you with the latest news about the Drama General Hospital.
I cannot believe they did that. No, seriously, what are we even watching right now? Because I sat through that episode thinking, okay, maybe they're going to pull back at the last second. Maybe Danny is going to hesitate. Maybe someone steps in and reminds us that this is still a child we're talking about. And then, no, they double down. They lean in. And suddenly we're supposed to accept that Danny Morgan is on the verge of stepping into the same darkness that destroyed his father's life. And I'm sorry, but this isn't bold storytelling. This is reckless. And here's the thing that really gets under my skin. This could have been incredible, like genuinely powerful, emotionally devastating television. A kid who idolizes his father so much that he's willing to destroy himself just to bring him home. That's Shakespearean. That's tragedy. That's the kind of layered storytelling General Hospital used to excel at. But instead of letting it breathe, instead of letting us feel Danny's desperation, they rush him straight into mob-adjacent behavior like he's already halfway to becoming Jason. But he's not Jason. Hez not even close, and that's where Steve Burton's reaction matters. Because when the actor who embodied Jason Morgan is openly frustrated with the direction, you know something isn't lining up. Jason didn't choose that life. Not really. His brain injury stripped away parts of him, rewired him, made him vulnerable to a world he never would have entered otherwise. That's the tragedy. That's the point. And now Danny is just walking into it voluntarily, like it's some noble mission. I mean, what are we doing here? And don't get me wrong, I understand the emotional logic. Danny wants to save his father. He feels powerless. Has grown up in the shadow of stories about Jason, about Sonny, about loyalty and sacrifice and danger. And now Jason is gone, taken by forces Danny can't even fully comprehend, and Sonny represents the only path forward. That's compelling. That's real. But the execution, it's so heavy-handed that it almost feels like they're skipping over the most important part, the fear. Because where is the fear? Where is the hesitation? Where is that moment where Danny realizes, if I do this, I might not come back the same? Instead, we get this almost impulsive confidence, and that's what makes it unbelievable. And then you throw Sidwell into the mix. Sidwell, a man who has been playing a long game, outmaneuvering Sonny, orchestrating chaos from the shadows, and we're supposed to believe Danny is just gonna, track him down, confront him, outsmart him. But wait, because this is where my frustration turns into something else, something worse, anxiety. Because if the storyline goes in this direction, then Danny is going to get hurt. Not maybe, not possibly, it's inevitable. And I don't just mean a close call or a scary moment. No, I mean something that fundamentally changes him. Because that's how this world works on GH. You don't dip your toe into the mob and walk away clean. You either get pulled under or you become part of it. And Sonny knows that. That's what makes his position so painful to watch, because he sees himself in Danny. He sees Jason in Danny, and he knows exactly where this road leads. But he also sees the pain, the desperation, the need to do something. And Sonny has never been good at telling people no when they come to him like that. So what does he do? Push Danny away and risk losing him completely, or keep him close and hope he can control the damage? There's no winning move here. None. And Alexis, she's trying to hold on to logic, onto boundaries, onto some sense of normalcy in a situation that is spiraling out of control. But even she can't fully contain what's happening, because Danny isn't just reacting anymore. He's acting. He's making choices. Dangerous ones. And I keep thinking, remember when GH used to take its time with these arcs? Remember Michael's descent after prison? remember how long it took for him to even begin processing what had happened to him? That was layered, that was patient, that was earned. And now everything is happening at breakneck speed, like they're afraid we'll get bored if they don't keep escalating. But I'm not bored. I'm frustrated. And I know some fans are going to say, this is exciting. This is finally giving Danny something to do. And I respect that. I really do. Because yes, Danny needed a storyline. He needed purpose. But there's a difference between giving a character purpose and throwing them into a narrative that doesn't fit their emotional age. Because let's be honest, this doesn't feel like Danny's story. It feels like a Jason retread, a shortcut, a way to recreate a dynamic that worked in the past without doing the work to justify it in the present. And that's lazy. But then again, part of me is hooked. See? This is what drives me crazy about this show. Because even while I'm sitting here ranting, I'm also thinking, what if they're setting up something bigger? What if this isn't about Danny becoming Jason too, but about breaking that cycle? What if his attempt to save his father ends in failure, and that failure becomes the turning point that defines his future? What if Jason comes back just in time to see what Danny has become, and it destroys him? Now that would be powerful. But only if they commit to the consequences. Only if they don't pull their punches. Because if Danny walks away from this without real damage, emotional, psychological, relational, then what was the point? What was the story even about? And here's the darker possibility, the one I don't even want to say out loud, but it's there. What if Danny doesn't make it out okay? What if this storyline isn't about transformation, but about loss? Because GH has never been afraid to go there. And if they're truly leaning into this darker tone, then we have to consider that nothing is off the table. And that scares me. So yeah, I'm all over the place right now. I'm angry, I'm intrigued, I'm worried, am invested, whether I like it or not. Because this storyline, it's walking a very thin line between brilliance and disaster. And if they get it right, we're looking at one of the most emotionally devastating arcs in years. But if they get it wrong, then we just watched the beginning of a character derailment that didn't have to happen. And honestly, I'm not sure which way it's going to go. I cannot believe they are even hinting at this direction. I mean, turning Danny into some kind of weapon, are we really going there now? Because if that's what this storyline is building toward, then General Hospital is not just pushing boundaries, it's straight up rewriting the emotional DNA of the Morgan legacy. And I'm not sure they fully understand what they're playing with. And let's just say it out loud. The idea that Danny could be pulled into some kind of dark training program, something designed to strip him down, reshape him, rebuild him into a controlled, dangerous version of himself, that's not just another mob storyline. That's something colder, something far more disturbing. That's not Sony's world anymore. That's WSB level manipulation, Cassadine adjacent psychological conditioning, the kind of thing we've seen destroy grown adults, not a kid who is still trying to figure out who he is. But here's where it gets complicated, because part of me sees the potential, a kidnapped Danny taken not just as leverage against Jason, but as a long-term investment by someone like Sidwell, that's terrifying in a way GH hasn't fully tapped into in years. Imagine it. Danny disappears. Sonny is scrambling. Alexis is falling apart. And somewhere far away, Danny is being broken down, trained, conditioned to obey, to survive, to become something unrecognizable. That's a storyline that could hit hard if handled with care. But then I stop and think, are they actually going to handle it with care? Because we've been here before. Remember when the show flirted with brainwashing arcs, identity manipulation, characters being turned into something they're not? Sometimes it worked, but a lot of times it felt rushed, incomplete, like the writers were more interested in the shock than the aftermath. And that is what worries me here, because this isn't just about Danny being in danger. This is about Danny being fundamentally changed. And if the storyline goes in that direction, then we are talking about Danny coming back not as himself, but as something closer to Jason, or worse, a version of Jason without the humanity that made him compelling. A weapon without a conscience. And I'm sorry, but that is a huge risk. Because Jason worked as a character not because he was dangerous, but because there was always that quiet, internal struggle beneath the surface. Even when he was at his coldest, you could feel something buried inside him. That's what made him tragic. That's what made him human. But if Danny is just turned into a perfect weapon, then where is the soul? Where is the conflict? Where is the emotional weight? And yet, I can't deny the narrative symmetry. That's what makes this so frustrating. Because on paper, it makes sense. Jason was shaped by trauma. Now Danny is being reshaped by it. A cycle repeating itself, but in a more controlled, more deliberate way. Not an accident this time. A design. That's chilling. And Sonny, can we talk about Sonny in this scenario? Because if Danny is taken and turned into something dangerous, Sonny is going to blame himself completely. Has going to see this as the ultimate failure, not just as a protector, but as the man who brought this world into Danny's life in the first place. And that guilt, that could push Sonny into a darker place than we've seen in years. Maybe even beyond redemption. And then there's Jason, because you know he's coming back into this. You know at some point Jason is going to be forced to confront what Danny has become. And that moment, that confrontation between father and son, where Jason realizes that Danny has been turned into a reflection of his worst self, that could be devastating, if only they take the time to build it. But that's the thing. That's always the thing with GH lately. They have these incredible, emotionally rich ideas, and then they rush through them like they're afraid to sit in the discomfort. And this storyline needs discomfort. It needs slow tension. It needs moments where we see Danny resisting, breaking, changing, not just a sudden transformation that happens off screen or in a montage. Because if they skip that, then what's the point? And I know some fans are going to love the idea of Danny becoming this darker, more dangerous version of himself. I get the appeal. It's dramatic. It's intense. It raises the stakes. But personally, I think it's a slippery slope. Because once you take a character that young and push them that far into darkness, it's very hard to bring them back in a way that feels real. So what's the end game here? Is Danny saved? Is he redeemed? Or is he permanently changed? Because those are three very different stories. And right now, it feels like the show is trying to flirt with all of them at once without fully committing to any. And that's where I get frustrated again. Because if you're going to do this, if you're going to take Danny, break him, rebuild him, and turn him into something dangerous, then you have to follow through. You have to show the consequences. You have to let it hurt. You have to let the characters suffer in a way that feels earned, not just dramatic for the sake of it. Otherwise, it's just another twist, another headline moment that fades as quickly as it arrives. And Danny deserves more than that. So yeah, I'm torn. I really am. Part of me is intrigued by how dark and ambitious this could be, but another part of me is deeply worried that they're about to cross a line they can't uncross. Because once Danny becomes a weapon, he might never fully become a son again.
I'll be back at the General Hospital soon. We'll see each other again soon. Thank you for supporting my channel. Goodbye and see you again.